when I was in India. And one afternoon I went down to speak in the southern part of India in a school that was attended by and large by young boys and girls who were the children of former untouchables. And I remember that afternoon that the principal got up to introduce me. And as he came to the end of his introduction, he said, "I would like to present to you a fellow untouchable from the United States of America." And for the moment I was peeved, I was shocked that I would be introduced as an untouchable. But pretty soon my mind ran back across to America. And I started thinking about the fact that there were so many places that I couldn't go because of the color of my skin. I started thinking about the fact that my 20 million brothers and sisters in the Negro community of America are still at the bottom of the economic ladder, deprived of adequate housing conditions, unable to live in numerous neighborhoods because of the color of their skin. I started thinking about the fact that my little children were still judged on the basis of the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. And I had to say to myself, I am an untouchable, and every Negro in the United States is an untouchable. And segregation is evil and sinful because it stigmatizes the segregated as an untouchable in a caste system. And this is why I'm convinced that we have a moral edict, a moral mandate to work to get rid of this unjust and evil system. And we must make it clear all over America that we are through with segregation now, henceforth, and forevermore, if the American dream is to be a reality.
There's a black storm coming, see the lightning strike, black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, along with my Rafiki, which in the Kiswahili language means friend, Brother Derek Williams. We like to invite you to another one of our, I hope, interesting and informative discussions. You saw a video before we came on, and we'll get back to that video, but it should give you a little hint of what our discussion will be. We'll talk about and put that more in context of why we started with. I'm sure that's a speech you might not have heard Brother King talk about in all the Black History Month celebration. But that speech was made informed by me through a book that we're going to be basing our discussion on, and it's a book that was written by this sister here, Professor Isabel Wilkerson. Some of you might be familiar with her previous work. I've read it, and Brother Derek here has read it. It was called The Warmth of Many Suns, and that book dealt with the forced migration and migration of Black people from around 1915 to the 1970s, and to run away and come out of segregation in the South to the North in hopes of finding true freedom. But what they found was more of the same. And this book which is called Caste. I have my copy here. Brother Derek has his copy, and that's a close-up of what it is. It's called Caste, The Origin of Our Discontent by Professor Isabel Wilkerson. And if you can see that little medallion to the side, it's also something that Oprah Winfrey had recommended for the country to read. This is a powerful book and a very informative book. Brother Derek, how did you enjoy that book?
Absolutely. It was good reading. It was hard reading.
Yes.
But I've been challenged with hard reading all my life around this topic. But when I finished it, without a doubt, I felt that this was a piece of work that should be on the shelf of literally anyone and everyone that lives in America, and not just here, because of what she did in opening the topic of caste and race, and how she codified it, gave it definition. It was truly a stellar piece of work, Smoke.
One thing, by research, I saw a number of interviews that the sister done, because this book is a very powerful book, and a lot of people want to bring her on their shows and interview her, because whether we're black or white or Latino, when you read this book and you look at America from this perspective of a caste system,
yes.
Similar to the more infamous or famous one from India, it gives you a totally different perspective and a better understanding of why we have these issues, regardless of all the laws and civil rights acts and all the so-called progress. There's always seemed to be something that, we take two steps forward and one step back. But when you look at this structure that she talks about, she said that the caste system, the hierarchical caste system that was created not only in the last 250 years or 230 years since the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution was written. She says it goes back all the way to the founding of this system called America. And it basically goes back even further, but since we're talking about America. So this caste system came out, it wasn't coincidentally or haphazardly happened, it came out deliberately, the structure. She called it the bones.
Yes.
And what I look at this as an x-ray. See, you can't see the bones. We talk about racism, which is the skin, based on skin color, but the structure that makes us function in this environment is our bones.
Yes.
And the bones of the American structure is this caste system. And that's what we're going to be discussing, because that's what's in this book. And it was duly researched. Her previous book that I talked about, The Warmth of Many Suns, took her 15 years of research. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And she said she was also, and this is just an outgrowth, a continuation
from the
of the story,
yeah.
which is, she delves deeper. She goes to India. She goes. She talks about there are three models, and she mostly in the United States. The other one, other than India, she talks about is the Nazi Germany, yeah. During that period of time. You have experience with race relationship from days in the military. To tell people what your expertise, so you could validate some of the things she's talking about.
Well, I think the most significant thing for me, having worked in the field, is part of our training was to conduct facilitative sessions, and we had the confrontation stage of racism and the acknowledgement stage. And when the students, particularly white students, got to a particular point in the training, and the question would be asked, did they feel that the training was significant in helping them be able to define why they did the things that they did? When they felt confident in sharing with you, one of the things that they would invariably say is that, this is all fine and good, But I have a fear. And we would ask, what is that fear? And they would almost collectively be of the opinion that if there was equity across the board, if you all were able to acquire an equal playing field, that my greatest fear is that you would do to us what we have done to you. And that's interesting because in light of all of the insight and the admittance of the system and what the system had created, they were still tied to the fear that if they acquiesced and gave in terms of their own prejudicial behavior, that we would do the same thing that they had done to us, which is an interesting analysis, a psychological analysis
psychological
in the
guilt.
field of racism.
Yeah.
And it really plays into what we're talking about with the caste system.
Because there's
as
an
well.
intuitive knowing that what was done isn't right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm reminded of, you remember Ken Burns' Civil War? The movie,
yes.
the documentary came out in 1990.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it's a 9-part series. The first part they started with Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
Opened the series, and in the last part, the 9th part, it ended with a sister, a historian named Barbara Fields. And I never forgot what she said. Mm-hmm. She quoted Faulkner, who said, history is not when, history is.
Yes.
And just as they were talking about the Civil War, she said that we are still fighting the Civil War. Now, this was 1990 when she said these words. And I never forgot that. She said that the values and the reason that we fought the Civil War in the 1860s, every generation must continue that fight to maintain those values that were established, where 700,000 Union soldiers died, or 700,000 people died that they know of, because their counting system, it wasn't perfect. It could have been more. But that was 2% of the population of the United States.
Yes.
For ideas. And there was also, if you go into the 1900s, there were 2 pillars to show you that the same philosophy, like you're talking about some of the white students in some of your programs in race relationships that you had to do, there was still this idea of, the lost cause.
Yes.
This came out of the Civil War, and you can see it in 2 movies. In 1913 was The Birth of a Nation. Mm-hmm. And in the 1930s, there was another movie that was like another pillar that was produced by that hierarchical system called Gone with the Wind. Yes. And in both those times, 1913 to 1932, you were the Ku Klux Klan, which was the Al-Qaeda for us as people of African descent, and one of the reasons that you had this migration to the North because of the terror that was being done to black people during the early part of the mean-spirited, I call it mean-spirited 20th century, showed that the idea still exists. And if you look at the political system today, where we have white supremacists in political office and white nationalists in political, they're still quoting the same type of ideas that the Confederacy was talking about. Where you're talking about states' rights and this kind of thing. So what this sister was saying, Barbara Fields, back in 1990, about us continuing to fight the Civil War, we are fighting it to this very day in the ideas. And if we don't understand that the Civil War was, the Civil War is.
Yes.
And this is one of the things that we, as here in the Umoja Circle, want you to understand, that as long as we are not aware of the structure of America, all the superficial stuff that we kind of point to. There were some laws that were written in the 1870s, in the late 1860s, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the Civil Rights Act. All those are nice, but until you see the X-ray that shows you those bones and the structure, the structure is a caste system.
Good point, Smoke. I think her work particularly illuminates and explains to a mild and gross point, explains the behavior that we're constantly engaged in.
Thank you. Exactly.
And so often we want to attribute everything to race. And while race is intricately tied to the caste system, this is a little bit deeper, because so much of our behavior is dictated by our perceived notion as to where we fit at in this hierarchical plane.
That's the thing, the psychological
and so what Isabel Wilkerson did is brought about a more conscious awareness of behavior that we have excused, and showed how routine and natural it is for us to have a dominant class, a middle class, a lower class, which is easily seen when you look at the India system of caste. But the similarity of it is just it's impeccable, so to speak. You know.
Yeah, that's what she called it, the bones. She said that the caste system that was created by law, and it's kind of ties into what we're doing, similar to this book being an outgrowth of her previous book. Mm-hmm. This discussion is an outgrowth of previous discussions we've had.
Right, absolutely.
In the last couple of months, we've done case studies and discussion on a book based on called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
We're talking about you can't have a 400 years of psychological warfare done on the people and not have any kind of adverse effect to this day.
Yes.
And a lot of the behavioral pattern that you see that might seem negative in the black community came out of the survival of a insidious system that we call enslavement and then apartheid, Jim Crow. The next discussion that grew out of that, we talked about critical race theory, which was a theory that talked about the laws. Mm-hmm. You can't have all these laws that shape and built the structure that we're talking about called caste. Mm-hmm. It was built by laws.
Yes.
And, you know, and now we're talking about head on that structure.
Yes.
This hierarchical structure. Let's go back to that video. We'll talk about that because that kind of validates what we're talking about. If you remember Dr. Martin Luther King talking about that in that speech that we opened up with. And that's the reason we opened up with that speech. I don't know about you, but it was I was introduced to that particular event that he's talking about in this book. It's in the book. And she brought it to my attention. And then I found this speech, which shocked me. All the years that I've studied, and I knew, like you said, that he went to India, but I didn't know about this particular event. And what he's talking about, this speech was in 1965. He didn't talk about this until that time. Mm-hmm. So it's had some kind of effect on him. And you know that after 1965, he changed a lot in his, peaceful kind of way. He understood. Then there was during the time he said that I might have sent my people into a burning building.
Yes. Yes.
In order to blend into this system. The system is burning. Yes. He was made aware of his position. And what happened was, in 1959, him and Coretta was invited to India because it was known that he was becoming very popular after Montgomery as a leader of the civil rights movement. And after he went there, he was lauded over. He met Nehru, who was the prime minister at the time. He also wanted to, because he believed his philosophy of nonviolent civil disorder, he said it was based on what he saw Mahatma Gandhi did from India, and they knew about it. So he was sent over there, went to luncheons, saw the prime minister everywhere he went. He stayed a whole month, from February to March of 1959. He said he wanted to see the people that were called Kajans. Kajans are a term that which meant untouchables, which is a pejorative term. And this is a system, like we said, that many people are familiar with. We have these caste systems, which goes back 2,000-3,000 years in that subcontinent. And he was taken to Dravidian, which is one of the southernmost states in Corella, which is one of the most southern states. And he was taken, after a luncheon he said he wanted to go see some outcasts. And he was taken to a high school where outcasts were going to school. In fact, the principal who introduced him was an outcast. And like he said, when the principal was finished talking, he was going to introduce Martin Luther King, and he told the students, I want to welcome one of us, an outcast from the United States.
A fellow untouchable.
A fellow untouchable. And he said he was rocked.
Yeah.
And that in the video, he said, first of all, we say pissed. He said, I was peeved. But he started thinking.
Yeah.
It opened him to another way of thinking. And like we always say at the Umoja Circle, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that everybody's working on fiction. And it takes discussion, and only through a discussion and dialogue, which we model every time we come on the air, that's where you get a shift in consciousness. And he had a shift in consciousness by that simple introduction by a principal. He was well educated, you know. India got his independence a decade earlier, 1940s, late 1940s, after the World War II was over. But they still had this system called Caste, with 60 million Indians, regardless of what the Constitution gave them rights in, were still put in this position of servitude. And to be associated with that rocked them.
Yeah, well, I call it structural analysis. The more you are involved in any concept, any activity, often you need to leave that activity and have another person's viewpoint. We often miss it for the same reason fish don't notice water.
Exactly.
Okay, and so Martin, I believe his visit, what it did was it explained some of the structural inadequacies and the foundation of the maltreatment and the structural treatment of blacks in America. And so it was necessary for him to be outside of the American schema in order to see another system at work. And then he extrapolated his analysis or his, what he saw, and brought it back and looked at our beginnings, and he saw the depth of our structural caste system that was very similar to what he
ran into in India in
Yeah.
1959, and in that speech he said that after thinking about it,
and it helped.
He was right.
It helped illuminate his strategy in how do we address and deal with the discrimination and the maltreatment in America. It took that because he went to another level and recognized that many of the things that he had acquiesced and accepted, not that he was wrong, but he had another perspective.
And he had a deeper perspective because, again, as he puts in the book, this is the bones.
Yeah, right.
Okay?
Yes,
Compared to
yes.
the superficial surface
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Okay? This thing we call the melanin, because everything else about us is human.
Yeah.
As something that is simply abstract and should be accepted as a human trait, whether you have a little yellowish tint or reddish tint or a brownish, blackish tint, that should be irrelevant in how you function as a human being. There's only one race, the human race. But when you create a system that differentiates how you would be treated
Based on that.
this is the trigger.
Yeah.
Okay? But until you change the structure, which controls the way people behave, because if you use the word caste, you can talk about a caste in a play. Okay? Isn't there a particular role that you play?
Roles, right.
Word that you say? And if you say something that is contrary to the script that you were given, you could throw that whole system out of gear. And that's what we're still seeing today when people of African descent, Native people, the last 50, 60 years, through civil rights actions, are not playing the role, or as they were cast
Yes.
by laws
Yes.
for over 400 years.
Yes. Yes.
And you can see the response in contemporary politics when you deal with these neocons and these Republican conservatives, and just recently what the Supreme Court judges did to trying to roll back Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
You cannot. That's changing the whole script.
Yeah.
And those in power who are in the higher class, because they place themselves in that caste system.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
Not way before the Civil War,
Yeah.
from the founding of this system
Yeah.
as English male man.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people don't realize that when people came over to the colonies, they were not white.
No, they
The
were not.
concept of whiteness meant nothing to somebody
exist.
from Germany or somebody
did not
from
exist.
England or France. They were Englishmen, Frenchmen, or whatever. But when you have this structure called where if the color of your skin determined how you were treated, what you had access to, that forces all these people who came over as immigrants, they had to find a way in where they fit.
Yes.
Which tier are they going to be in?
Yes. And so you had a double whammy, basically.
Exactly.
You're dealing with the caste and you're dealing with racism. I mean, even when people came in from Europe at the different periods and epic times, one thing that was certain and was sure that in order for you to fit in here, you must behave a certain kind of way. And people who didn't have any animus towards black people at all knew that in order for them to go up the hierarchical level,
Yeah.
that they must mistreat and look down on this
They followed
lower
laws.
caste system.
They were laws that they had to follow
It
in
was the
order to
rule.
fit in.
It was the rule. I mean, people would tell them, in order for you to fit in, this is what you must do.
And another thing is, those people who wrote the story, their own story that we were taught for hundreds of years, used nebulous words.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Even like
Yes.
racism.
Yes.
But when you use the word caste,
everybody can fit into
it
that.
wakes you up and makes you say, let me just take a closer look.
Yeah.
Am I a member? Well, if you're white, you are a member of the upper class.
Yeah.
That means that people who have those questions like you dealt with when you were doing social actions and race relations, they have to understand how do I change this?
Absolutely.
When you hit them with the proper words.
Absolutely.
The proper ways of thinking.
Yes.
Now, we'll be continuing this discussion, and like everything else, when we get into our discussion, time flies. But this caste system, we're going to deal more about it. And another interesting thing is we were a model for Germany, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.